If you want to save time and still get accurate results, then partner with 4 Pillars Research, proud sponsors of PI Perspectives. We specialize in uncovering insurance policies that can make or break your case. From identifying unknown policies to uncovering accurate policy information, we streamline the process so you can focus on your case. Partner with 4 Pillars Research and unlock the full potential of your investigations. Visit researchfpr.com to learn more.
Looking for an insurance agent that puts you first? Every PI business is different. That's why OREP Insurance can shop multiple markets to ensure you get the best coverage to meet your unique business needs. OREP's model is business by the golden rule, and for over 20 years, they've built their business by putting their clients first. So come enjoy a fast online application and same-day certificates of insurance at OREP.org. OREP has coverage for armed investigators, executive protection, and even has a separate policy for security firms. The application takes less than 5 minutes, so visit OREP.org today. OREP.org.
We're proud to announce a partnership with InvestigatorConference.com. This free site tracks all the live events in the industry. Want to plan out your travel schedule to see what events are happening in the next few months? Are you hosting an event? Send them an email to add the date. Visit the site today. That's investigator-conference.com. Investigator-conference.com. Welcome to the newest episode of PI Perspectives. This week, Matt speaks with Iris Eytan from the amazing nonprofit Protect Ethical Prosecutors. Matt and Iris have a great conversation about her career as a criminal defense lawyer and the defining case that inspired her to advocate to reduce corruption in the legal community. This episode is a great look at some of the issues the legal system faces today and how using private investigators can help root out unfair prosecutions. So please welcome Iris Eytan and your host, New York PI, Matt Spaier.
And welcome everyone to this episode of PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. So recently I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and I ran into a good friend of the show, Rachel Roberts. I love Rachel to death. She's one of my favorite investigators from Colorado. And she said, you got to talk to my friend Iris. You really, really need to talk to her. She'd be a great guest. And, I get bullied by Rachel all the time. So I figured, why not? So Iris Eytan, I want to welcome you to the program. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Okay, so Rachel is a PI in Colorado. She does a lot of criminal defense work, and that's kind of your background, how you got into the business. And obviously, you're an attorney, but you've got a story to tell. So before we get into that story to tell and the nonprofit that you're involved with that you formed, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your background, who you are, and what you do?
Sure. So I've been practicing law for 30 years. I really went into the practice of law to help people. And I just wanted to, I was dedicated to be a lawyer for people with mental illness, to help them, assert their rights and make sure they were treated humanely in different sorts of institutional scenarios. Okay. And that was my goal when I went to law school, and when I left law school, that's what I did. So I did a lot of civil rights work to make sure that when people were locked up in jails or prisons or mental health hospitals, that they were treated humanely. And that led me into criminal defense, because a lot of the people that I was helping were actually in the criminal justice system because they were, either findings that they were incompetent to proceed, or that they might be not guilty by reason of insanity, or a lot of people, as we know, get dumped into the criminal justice system because there's just no ability for people to get good care out in the community for mental health treatment. It's pretty much, it's not non-existent, but it's not there. So the treatment exists way better in the criminal justice system, unfortunately. So took me there. I never took any trial advocacy classes through law school.
Right.
I wasn't planning on being a cross-examiner or a trial lawyer. That wasn't at all close to my imagination or my desire.
Sure.
So when I started I started as a public defender, and I really cause oriented, really wanting to help people, really wanted to make sure the Constitution was followed, and I was a public defender for not long enough. I was a civil rights lawyer, then I was a public defender for
Right.
3 years in Colorado. And then I transitioned to be a private criminal defense lawyer, and where I was a partner in a law firm for 14 years. Then I started my own law firm where I only practiced criminal defense.
Right.
So total, through that time, I practiced still a lot of I did a lot of class actions for people with mental illness, suing the state of Colorado
Right.
for their mistreatment of people with mental illness while I was doing a lot of big cases in criminal defense.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like I can recall as a private investigator coming across people that you knew something wasn't right. Whether it means finding somebody who maybe they're entitled to some money and they're indigent, they're living on the streets, and you're going to try and track them down. That's some of the things that we get asked to do. But I have a specific memory. I guess I wasn't even in business yet. I was working for an attorney. So this is maybe 27, 28 years ago. And it was a divorce case. So
Mm,
it was a husband who wanted to divorce his wife. And the reason he wanted to divorce his wife is she attempted to kill their kids, and she got institutionalized for that. So my role was to go to the facility and serve her with legal papers that a divorce action has been started. And I get there and I'm like, okay, this doesn't seem right. Like I got to serve papers on somebody who
mm,
ensure that she understands what these papers are for, right?
mm,
And ethically, I was like, okay, I know like I have a job to do here, but
mm,
I know this is the correct person, but can I say that, she reasonably understands what she was doing? Like I really struggled with it. But
mm,
thankfully, there was policy in place at this institution that if anyone who was getting served legal papers, you served it to the administrator at the facility, and then it would file the way that whatever path it was supposed to take, it would go from there. And I'm like, okay, I can live with that. But for me to like say, okay, here's your papers, you're getting divorced, for somebody that obviously there were
mm.
some mental issues there, I kind of struggle with that a little bit.
Yeah, it is very it's hard actually representing people that have mental illness for the very same reason.
Right.
Because, you you need to make sure that your client can understand your consultation, your advice, and understands where they are and what they're doing and what their rights are. And and it's and only really the lawyer that's representing the person can understand whether or not that person can comprehend what's actually going on.
Sure.
And too much of the time, I feel like the people who aren't intimately in touch with that person think that they know better. I've had judges who, I've had clients who are really, developmentally delayed, and I had a client who probably, depending on the test, his IQ was either 65 or 70. And the judge kept looking at him and saying to him, "I know you understand me. I know you understand me." And he was so shaken. And I kept telling the judge, "He doesn't understand you.
Yeah.
This is, you're reading him his rights and what this evaluation is going to be that you're going to send him to see if he's competent or not, and he's not understand any of these words don't make any sense to him." And the judge looked at him and just said, you know what I'm talking about. Psychologist, one of these, brain doctors, they're going to talk to you. And um, it's so disheartening and frustrating.
Definitely frustrating. Um,
Yeah, and like it feels so merciless, really.
yeah, I can remember actually even another situation, um, and this involved an elderly person who was about 101 or 102 years old. And there was some questions about dementia,
Mm.
and it was a bed sore case. So she was suffering in this particular medical institution, and they wanted me to have her healthcare proxy signed, and notarized, and all this other stuff. And I remember having a discussion with her. And I got to tell you, this woman was more competent than a lot of people that I know. She knew what day it was. She knew why I was there. She was recalling the last time her son, who was with me at the point, came to visit. And she was yelling at him for not coming, like more often. And it was like if I was ever questioned about whether or not I thought this person was competent, there was
Right.
no doubt in my mind. However, the administrator felt differently about it, right? And he would not give me access to get this done, and it caused like it's such a problem where like the police almost came. Like it was a big deal. And I obviously left. I can't make somebody do something. And unfortunately I saw that woman again, but it was maybe a month later in the morgue when I was taking pictures of her after she had
Oh,
passed away, and just
oh,
recording the bed sores. But it always stuck with me because it's you have these definitions. I understand why the laws are in place, and it's good that they're there, and it's good to question, right? I feel like this administrator knew that the hospital was in trouble for doing what
right,
doing,
right.
and they was trying to just jam me up. That was the kind of impression I got on that. But kudos to you for really feeling this passion about it. I think when we all start our careers, right, and you look at law, and it's funny because you and I were talking about, well, what are we going to talk about? There's so many things that we could talk about to do it, and especially law and investigators, the same kind of the same thing. Like you find a specialty, a passion, and you kind of run with it. And it seems like this is not your only passion, but it's something you're very passionate about, right? How did that come about?
Um, this meaning criminal defense.
Yeah, I think the advocating for folks that maybe are mentally
I
challenged.
mean, it really was an event that happened when I was in college, and I really wanted to be a psychologist, actually. And my family, I'm first generation American, and my father did his medical study abroad, and then he did his residency in the United States. And all I knew was medicine, and so for me, naturally, I thought it would be great to be a psychologist to help people, help kids based on some of the stuff I went through when I was a kid.
Sure.
And so I worked in county mental health hospitals to make money through college.
Okay.
And I worked at the Pima County Community Mental Health Hospital in Tucson, Arizona. And my job was to take vitals and just make sure that people on the ward were behaving themselves. Not like, I mean, at that point I was probably 20 years old. So, but they're paying me between 11 p.m. and 7 in the morning were my shifts. So that, right, no one wanted those shifts.
Yeah, that's some downtime. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
right. That's right. But it usually was when probably the nurses wanted the patients to sleep.
Right.
And so I'd hear things, the nurses saying things like, let's medicate them, let's comatose them. And I'm not going to say that they used exactly those words, but it made me feel so it was unnatural and felt unethical to me. And there was a girl in the unit, and she looked my age, and she was bulimic. And I didn't understand why she was in this unit with a bunch of other men. By the way, back then they would not separate men and women, strangely. And I saw a woman dressed like me now asking, and I asked, what's she doing talking to this girl, this patient that's bulimic? And the nurse said, well, she's helping her. How's she helping her? Well, she's her lawyer. What do you mean she's her lawyer? She's going to help her get out of here.
Right.
I thought, this is great. So there's somebody that like doesn't have to work in the system to help these people, that I can actually help them get out and help them get maybe better treatment and advocate for them. And that's why I decided to go to law school. That's really what, what drove me. And being in the criminal justice system, or legal system, as I call it, for the last 30 years, it's a really strange place to help people.
Yeah.
It's harsh. It's handcuffs and iron bars and blood and guns, and there's not a lot of room for compassion and empathy, creativity. And it's a hard place to do what I really want to do.
Yeah, and you were just doing the late nights again too. Just when you thought you were getting away
Yeah,
from late nights,
yeah,
you get
yeah, yeah.
calls where you got to go out, in the middle of the night and go, to some horrific crime scene.
Right,
What the
exactly.
what the deal is. So,
Yeah.
um, it's interesting. It's interesting, and it's interesting to see also how a lot of people that start in that area in law, how they kind of splinter off towards criminal defense, and oddly enough, towards plaintiff personal injury. I feel like it's one or the other. I've
Yeah, it's
so
true.
many great attorneys that they started off in their career, you know, a similar path, and then just ended up that way. It's interesting that you've kind of gone that route, but then you also saw other things, and when you start talking about misconduct and things of that nature. Um, Walk me down that path a little bit before we take the break. I want to kind of start to unpack this, and then we'll take a quick break and jump back in. But walk me down how you got there.
So the more experienced I became as a criminal defense lawyer, the more I started understanding something that I didn't want to believe. People think of me that know me as a really hard-charging, passionate, no nonsense lawyer, trial lawyer, and real go-getter. And
Everything
uh,
Rachel said about you, by the way.
okay, well, thank you. That was nice of Rachel. Like, it served me well being a criminal defense lawyer,
Sure,
but at the same time, people don't know this about me, that I actually I I I don't believe people I don't believe people intentionally do things to hurt people.
sure,
I don't to my core. I and if it happens one time, I just think it was a one-time thing.
sure,
And I moved to the next event. And when you're a criminal defense lawyer, there's no question that your colleagues, everybody around you, is talking about police officers, and there's definitely a slant there about, and if I could say, more than a slant, there's a high criticism about police officers overusing force,
sure,
not being truthful, um, not trusting them. And there's a lot of energy and training and education around, how to cross-examine police officers, how to investigate police officers, how to investigate investigations of police officers.
sure,
Everything is about about police officers, really. And I always just, kind of, you know, came to my own conclusions, but all the while always trusted that all the lawyers in the courtroom that I was working against or with were following the rules. They took an oath to follow the Constitution, and I believe they meant it.
yeah,
I never believed that the prosecutors, the district attorneys, were any different than me. We all followed the rules. Whatever you read in the document, you would question it, you might investigate it, find out something different, but you wouldn't hide it, you wouldn't lie about it. And if your case sucked, you just either deal the case or you talk to the other side about it and you move on. Um, I I realized, unfortunately, the more experienced I became, that it wasn't the police officers that I was so concerned about. It was these prosecutors that have so much power. They have power to decide who, when, where, and how someone is going to be charged. They also work in the legislature, deciding and telling policymakers how to set laws, how to increase sentencing, what law should. So they're making law, they're enforcing law, and they're deciding how it's going to impose. And I didn't know for the longest time, even when I was younger, that how little power judges have. They have no power. What judges have mandatory sentencing guidelines, and they look at them and they say, okay, you've pled guilty to this, and so this is your range of sentencing. Or you've agreed to a plea bargain with the prosecutor and the judge just blesses it, right? So judges have very little power. They're calling balls and strikes. And so I didn't realize the power of prosecutors, and I also didn't realize that sometimes, not all, because I don't believe that all do, but that sometimes prosecutors break the rules that they're trying to enforce on other people. And it was super disillusioning.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, don't tell a judge in the Southern District in New York you just said there, because they'll beg to differ.
Of course.
For sure.
Of course.
But I can see how you could say that. And it kind of makes sense. Listen, I can also say the same thing. Like, if you look at South Carolina and you hear the name Murdaugh, it hits a whole different level, because you start talking about a legacy of, I think, 120 years, if I remember correctly, of the Murdaugh family being a DA in a particular county.
Prosecutors,
yeah.
right?
Like that's a problem.
Look, I mean, it's judges aren't case actors, right? They're not court actors. They're not case actors. Judges don't have the evidence. They don't possess it. They don't know 95% of what the prosecutors know. They have no idea. Judges only know what the evidence is in the case when the case, if it ever gets tried, which is only 2% of cases across the country.
Oh, it's a great point. And what's their role? Their role is to instruct the jury, right?
Right.
Pattern jury of instructions. Here you go.
That's it. They do that, and they rule on which evidence should come in or come out of a trial.
Yeah.
So they rule on motions, like whether or not something was constitutional or not, whether or not, if a police officer should not have arrested somebody because they didn't have probable cause. The judge makes that determination based on the law.
Right.
And then the case goes forward. So they're making rulings, but they're not in charge of what evidence is out there. They're not reviewing body camera footage. They're not reviewing, confessions and or statements of witnesses. It's what's the prosecution, what they're presenting is what the judges and courts are reviewing. That's it.
Yeah.
So it depends on what the prosecutor is bringing to the table. They are so immensely powerful. And a prosecutor is the one that gets to decide how I'm going to charge you. I can charge you with 20 counts over the same act of stealing a candy bar, all different sorts of ways. Or a prosecutor can say, I'm just going to charge you with a petty theft for that.
Sure.
They get to decide.
You get to decide, and they get to present whatever to a grand jury, and you go, and God, I could even go for hours here.
Right.
Assault cases that we work on here in the city, because we do a lot of work. That's one of the verticals that we handle a lot, and seeing how that's all handled. But that's another story for another day. I think I got to go put my head back together, because I think you've just.
I know it's a lot.
So this is a good good place to take a break.
Okay.
And then when we come back, I want to drill down on this. I want to talk about, the Morphew case, and really in 22, and how that just kind of led to this evolution to where you are today. So we're going to dive into that. So everyone sit tight, and we'll be right back.
Check out the PI Institute of Education at piinstitute.com. Since 1989, Kelly Riddle has been teaching on subjects such as surveillance, nursing home investigations, insurance fraud, domestic investigations, hidden assets, and accident scene investigations. The PI Institute of Education is a featured learning partner in the investigatorstoolbox.com.
So check out the free content on the site, then visit the Institute for more great savings on additional classes. Satellite Investigations has launched its new website full of great new content. Matt and his team have released some great informative blogs. Make sure you log in to LinkedIn and follow Satellite Investigations for the latest content. Over the past year, our industry has been the target of foreign governments and agencies that have attempted to recruit unsuspecting investigators to gather intelligence or immediate expatriates. PI Perspectives is teaming up with the Federal Bureau of Investigations to get the word out about this ongoing crisis. If you've been contacted by an individual or company that might seem suspicious, please contact the FBI at tips.fbi.gov. You can also contact the New York field office at 212-384-1000 to report suspicious activity in any state. The link is also in the show notes. Even if you completed a job and it still doesn't sit right with you, you can report this activity. The only way to stop this trend is to work together. So let's do it.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. We're here with Iris Eytan. Iris is talking about some interesting stuff today. We're talking about prosecutors that are like King George, a little too much power. So, Iris, I want to welcome you back to the program.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we took a break, I almost had a mental breakdown myself, trying to compete.
Exactly.
Realizing who really controls the strings here in our legal system, for better or for worse. Over your career there, you had mentioned that you started to notice some things and see some things that just didn't sit well for you. And ultimately, I think it led you to walk away from your practice and start a nonprofit, Protect Ethical Prosecutors, which I think is amazing. But let's talk about that incident. Let's dial back to 2022 and kind of walk me to it. And if there's anything you want to cover before we get to that point, obviously it's your experience and not mine, and let's dig into it.
Okay. So in 2021, I was hired to represent Barry Morphew, and it was a year-long representation before the case was dismissed by the prosecutors. And in 2021, when I was hired, I had experienced, I'd say, 4 or 5 pretty monumental, in my mind, experiences where prosecutors had hidden evidence in cases that I was handling. And they either didn't tell the grand jury of very important information that likely would not have resulted in the indictments, including things like, hey, we don't really have probable cause here, and going forward to a grand jury anyway, hiding opinions of the experts involved in the cases, saying, actually, this is not a murder, and not telling me that the experts made those statements, and prosecutors holding on to this type of, what we call exculpatory information, evidence of innocence, right, and not letting me have it, like just to let me deal with it. Okay, you might still win the case. I'm not saying that but like, at least let me know so that I can ask these questions of these people and say, why did you come up with that opinion? Like, what led you to believe that? And so over that period of years, I became quite skeptical, but also a more analytical about the evidence I was receiving. So by the time the Morphew case came along, I knew what to ask for from prosecutors. All the things that maybe I had to go dig and find over a period of a year, 2 years, and waste court time, client time, money, resources, and my client being in jail, and just the havoc wreaked on their lives. And I'm trying to, at that point, figure out a way to shorten that gap, right? And up to this point, after being disillusioned, by the way, from these experiences, not seeing anything ever happen to these prosecutors that were called out by the judges in the cases. It wasn't Iris's opinion. This is opinions that judges were making rulings. I'm dismissing this case because, right, you have committed misconduct. And so I'm not seeing any accountability at all, no transparency. I get to this Morphew case, and I'm looking at the case, the affidavit that was 126 pages long, and in my eyes, it read like a tabloid. And and the question isn't whether or not Mr. Morphew is guilty or not. Okay, this is our jobs as lawyers in the courtroom, and a prosecutor's job. Their title is Administrator of Justice. That's their title. The American Bar Association uses that terminology for a reason, because they're not there to win at all costs, right? They're not there to get ahead, to become a senator, to become an elected DA. They're not there to have notches on their belt. They're there to make sure that the system is just.
Hold on, we got a wink, wink.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No one should be above the law, as they always say, except for it's funny that they are, right? So I received this affidavit, and over the period of a year, I'm fighting to get the information that I believe exists that's not really appearing in this affidavit. And the court keeps ordering it. And where, I hear Miss Eytan is saying that there's more to the DNA here, and it doesn't seem like you're showing it to her. And over the period of a year, it was revealed that the prosecutors, and it wasn't just one, it was multiple DAs that were involved in the case, or very experienced prosecutors, weren't providing very valuable exculpatory evidence to me and my client.
So were you able to use investigators to help kind of clear that path or get that evidence for you, or was that?
I mean, that's a whole nother subject matter, which we're going to take, because yes, I mean, Rachel was one of 3 investigators that I had to have on the Morphew case that were working full time. And everybody was, cutting their rates, cutting their costs. Everybody was, because they knew one human being can't afford this, right?
Well, that's a great point, right?
Right.
That kind of work. And this is something I don't have a ton of experience doing. I've always been personal injury, but I'm dipping my toes into the criminal defense world through another company I partner up with. And it's budgetary issues are like 90% of the problem. Yes, we need an investigator. No, we can't afford one.
Right. Right. And this is the whole thing. I mean, first of all, it is the legal system is slanted towards people that are entitled.
Yeah.
End of story. End of story. And if you have a job, if you're white, you are going to get more favorable results than anybody else in this country. It's a fact. It's that you can splice and dice up the data any way you want. That's just a fact. And
unless your name's Oren or Tal Alexander.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Topical. So
that's
I would say that argument is true, with exceptions here and there. But on a whole, I'll give you that argument. But there are,
well, I mean, on the whole, it is going to be brown and black people that are going to be arrested, for the very same things that white people are also responsible for or could be culpable for. But our prisons seem to be full of the black and brown and, per capita. So
you
just
make that argument for sure. 100%.
So, when I look at this and I think about all the clients I've represented, and they're fortunate enough to have resources. Now, it's not that they're millionaires, because they're not, but you kind of need to be when you're charged with a murder case and you can't fit in the public defender guidelines that are, if you have a public defender, you are extremely impoverished. Extremely. I think it's like $1,000 a month.
Right.
Okay. It is, you have no money. You don't have, you maybe are not even being able to pay rent.
Yeah.
You know, it's insane. So if you are past that very small threshold, um, you then need to hire a lawyer to represent you.
Right.
And when you're charged with something like murder, like Barry Morphew was, and all of the aspects of the case, you need a lot of help. You need a lot of lawyers, you need a lot of paralegals, you need a lot of investigators, and experts that you need to hire
Yeah.
if you are going to be able to take a stand against the very powerful prosecutors who have all the resources in the world at their fingertips. They have FBI, they have, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, they have their own sheriff's office, they have labs wherever they want. They don't have
Yeah.
to pay for any of this. This is all free. This is all free. They can have as many DAs as they want. So they have complete authority over the evidence, who's going to test it, and how many people are going to be involved in the case. Then when you charge somebody with a crime with a tabloid full of information that's false, that's missing, that's been omitted, what are you just staging? It's David and Goliath that
Yeah.
you're forcing. So fortunately, I've had very good relationships with people in the criminal defense field who are as passionate as I am, including Rachel Roberts,
Yeah.
who are not going to get paid what we should be paid,
Yeah.
because you can't. There's no way. There's lawyers I've seen that take the client's money, and they run out and they're like, I'm off the case. I'm not that lawyer. I'm not that. Never have been. And so my idea is, I'm going to help you. I'm going to represent you to the end, and I'm not going to get paid what I know I deserve to get paid, but I'm going to help you the best way that I can. So
It's novel. It's very novel.
I mean, we had three investigators on the case, and it wasn't enough. And the investigators, they're talking to witnesses and finding things out, like, in the affidavit. And one example that an investigator helped uncover was, it said, Barry Morphew checked into a hotel the next day, and the people who he worked with went into the hotel room and said it completely smelled like bleach. Okay. Obviously, the inference is that he was doing something untoward with the evidence from murdering his wife, and then he bleached the hotel room in order to clean up any, kind of biological, evidence.
Throw
Okay.
that on CSI, right? That's how they do it, right?
That's how they do it. They just throw a bunch of bleach everywhere. All right. It turns out that we're looking through the discovery, and there's emails back and forth with the FBI and the head of the hotel, and causes I think Rachel, or somebody, I think it was Rachel, to go out and talk to the hotel manager and ask these questions about the hotel room, and the hotel manager says, well, I told the FBI agent why it smelled like, because they asked me. Oh, really? What did you tell them? Well, I told them that the room is right above the pool, indoor pool in Colorado, and
Right.
we've been having terrible problems with the chlorine smell, and we've been trying to fix it over the period. So we actually closed that room. But because it was COVID and we needed to spread people out, we let Barry stay in that room that day.
Crazy.
So, that was an investigator that uncovered that. And by the way, if I had had that conversation with the hotel manager, and I just called the hotel manager and said, hey, I want to talk to you about this on the phone, I would have then become a witness, and I
Yeah.
couldn't represent Mr. Morphew.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Right.
That's a great point. And it's why it's so necessary,
Yeah.
to have that, and understanding, folks like Rachel, that this is what they do, and they understand the right questions to ask, and
That's right.
and how to do that, and that, Rachel's got an interesting background, and this isn't the Rachel Roberts show here, but her background is as a reporter, like someone
Right.
in news, like she doesn't have that law enforcement
Right.
background, but she worked with one of the best out there, Ellis Armstead. Ellis is a,
Yep. Yep.
and learning how to do this stuff. So there is a particular way to do things, and if it's a passion of yours to do that type of work, I would suggest that you find somebody who does it and you learn from them on how to do it,
Yeah.
because it is literally life or death, the work that you're doing, and within budget, right? Life or death within budget. You've got X amount of hours to answer this problem. How are you going to use it? Because that's the other issue, right? You finally get the budget,
Resources.
and now how do you use that? And I want to turn back to something you said earlier, when you're really discussing about learning lessons on okay, I made that mistake before, now I'm going to know what to ask for.
Right.
Same thing with investigations, right? You have that methodology, right? This is a technique that works, and it's going to take this amount of hours to do it. It's worked before, I'm going to use it again, right? I'm not tailoring, I'm not throwing things to the wind to see like what catches and what doesn't. No, you've got a plan, you've got
You
methodology.
don't have time for that. You have to be very strategic.
Yeah.
You can't go down rabbit holes when you don't have endless money. You're not the government, and you have very specific goals. And it's very hard. She is excellent at I've worked with Rachel on cases, I think, for the last decade. And she is an absolute expert. But I get it. We're not talking about Rachel Roberts.
Oh, I'm going to call her up and tell her she's going to sponsor the episode.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly, exactly. I look, when you look at just that one simple example of the bleach, and when you read it in an affidavit, and a judge reads that statement in an affidavit, and signed an arrest warrant holding Barry without bond, okay, for murder charges. That was one of the many things that were either in the affidavit or things that they intentionally kept out of the affidavit, all right, in order to convince a judge to hold him. And that was the beginning, of a year of understanding all of the information that they were withholding. And they made decisions not to write, like they would talk to an expert, a DNA expert, and the state's DNA expert. It's not just their consultant. It's a state's DNA expert who's looked at the DNA, and they would decide not to write notes about it so that they wouldn't have to turn it over. And so they were making deliberate decisions on what to hold back from providing the defense. There's a lot of people that talk about the remedy, in this case being, there should be open file discovery. Why isn't it that just prosecutors have to turn everything over? And I agree with that, but then then it depends on what they're going to put in their file.
Right.
Right. So
Yep.
I mean, right now, prosecutors have to turn over certain types of evidence, most evidence, right? And then when it comes to other evidence, it's not mandatory. They only have to turn over favorable evidence. Okay, what's favorable is up to them. They get to decide what's favorable. How do they know what my theory of the case is? How do they know how I view the case? How do they know what my client has told me, or what I believe to be true in this case? And so how can they make decisions on what's favorable or not? And unfortunately, what I've seen is when they say something is favorable, unfavorable, it's completely favorable.
Yeah.
And so there is, that case really landed at the end of the day with the judge making such harsh rulings about all of the evidence they hid and the court orders they were violating, that by the end of it, they secretly investigated the judge. These prosecutors secretly investigated the judge, believing that a true crime podcaster that gave him a tip that this judge was biased towards domestic violence offenders because he must be one because he's divorced. And so they investigated him and his ex-wife and his son's custodial issues to try and bounce him from the case, saying, we want to recuse you because you're making decisions on our ethics and we think you're wrong. We think you're biased.
So you bring up a really interesting point, right? And it's the way that really technology has changed things with people's ability to get online and write about things, right? And just get out there and just have an opinion about something and start to sway the public opinion, right? You need to be judged by a jury of your peers, right? And it used to be like, oh well, we can't be in this venue because too many people know
Right.
the case or what's going on here. You're not going to get a fair and impartial ruling on things. Like you can't do that anymore. There's no hey, we need to move this to a different venue. Like it doesn't exist anymore because there's no borders anymore. Everyone's writing about things and everyone's got an opinion. And then throw in Claude or any other AI system there where people are throwing content out there, and it could really change the perception on things. And I think one of the problems, the issues, and you had mentioned it earlier, these positions that they're holding, it's not the end game for these people. It's it's the starting, it's the jump off into politics or to whatever. And what gets you there? On my record, right? Yeah, you should vote for me, you should trust me because I've never lost a case. I never tried anyone who was innocent. Like any guilty verdict I got, they got what they deserved. I'm your guy, trust me. Right? And that's how they build their careers.
Right. I mean, and they're building their career saying, trust me. And in the meantime, their incentive is to win cases. It's not really to be ethical. It's not. And when I say they, I want to make clear that I don't mean all prosecutors. This is not, what I've worked with plenty of prosecutors who are earnest, honest, genuine. We all recognize the good facts and bad facts in a case. Everything is open, everything is discussed. And there's a lot of grace given to my clients and or me to them because there's such an open and honest conversation about the cases. But it's going back to talking about what's happening in the media. I mean, look, that in most Scandinavian countries and in Europe, they don't even allow photographs of people that are arrested on in news or on live media. It's not allowed because they don't want to interfere with the presumption of innocence. And anybody who's had friends or family that has ever been arrested, everybody knows that that's it. Everyone thinks you're guilty. Oh, you're arrested for this DUI. You're arrested for theft. You're arrested for that. No one's going, oh, but you must be innocent. No one's saying that. Who have you ever heard a single person say, oh, but you're presumed innocent? No. And so it's so dangerous. In the United States, how we villainize people, we show them in their booking photos all over, splashed all over, Reddit and Instagram and all over the news. And these true crime podcasters think they know everything. They know a percent of 1/2 of a percentile of the facts involved in the person's case and their life. And they're making these judgment calls, going on Claude, gathering information from non-factual sources, and they're coming out with opinions that are harming the people, their lives, and the justice system. And in Barry Morphew's case, the worst thing could have happened, which was the prosecutor was working with the true crime podcasters. I mean, it's so absolutely unethical. Yeah. It's so unethical. You don't sit down with profiling evil podcaster and talk about the case that you're prosecuting. Profiling evil, really? You think this is okay? I don't think anyone thinks this is okay. So they took a case that should have gone to a jury, by the way, at that time. That should have, and they violated ethics. They violated rules and court orders. They violated the public trust, is what they did, and they caused a case to be dismissed for good or bad. Okay, and that crushed me, that I watched the system crumble so easily and so quickly in the matter, like over someone's life. And to see this happen to him, to his family, to the community, to the victims involved, like everybody. I call it that, Barry a victim of that. But I think, the court system, we were in court at least, I don't know, 20 court dates. How much time do we take up? How much jail time do we pay for this guy? How many resources were thrown into it? And then to think about the aftermath, and how much energy went into trying to convict a man when what they needed to do was support their case instead of find ways around it. And that was the day when they dismissed the case. It was because of force. They couldn't get the judge off. They tried to investigate him and they couldn't find a way to get him off the case. And they just said, fine, we give.
Chess game. Yeah.
Right, chess game. And I was shocked that, when that happened, we were 7 days, 9 days from trial, where 1,000 jurors were supposed to be summoned in. We were ready to go to trial. We had spent the whole year working this up. At that point in time, I believe that I had probably 50% of what the prosecution had, but still I knew that we had to go forward with this trial. And I was sitting in court, and all this media and true crime podcasters are in the courtroom in the middle of nowhere in Colorado, by the way. Takes at least 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get there from Denver. So how do these people even know to be there on this day? It was just a pretrial conference. It was a no nonsense day, really. And it's packed. And I opened my computer up, and there it is, a motion to dismiss the case. The prosecutor sitting right across, looking stoically straight in front, waiting for the judge to come out and take the bench as if nothing was going on. But they had completely orchestrated this entire event, not telling us. I have my client crying, his daughters are crying, they're dismissing the case, and the motion says, because they found the remains. And all these people can think of is they found our mother and wife. Where is she? Where is she? Who did this? And these people. And so I could not believe the absurdity and the disappointment and the disillusion and the disgust. And that was it. I quit. I left that courtroom and I quit. And I decided that until I could find a way to hold unethical prosecutors accountable was the day that I could go back into the courtroom. I knew that until the system could be fair, there's the day that I could go back in there.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, And so then I obviously I want to plug what you're doing now.
Yeah.
I think it's important. So that all went down. You have this this realization that, hey, like I can't do this anymore. And then you got this next thing, this nonprofit that you started. So tell me, because we're running out of time here, so I definitely want to cover it, right? The CEO of Protect Ethical Prosecutors, that's your title now. That's what you're doing. What is the genesis of that? What do you guys actually do? How do you police? How do you keep the ethics in prosecutorial game? How do you do it, right?
Look, I'm pro integrity and I'm pro public safety. And I think ethical prosecutors want the same thing. They want consequences for intentional misconduct so it stops. Okay? And so the goal here is to protect ethical prosecutors and shield them from, I think, what people sometimes believe is an untrustworthy system. Right now, we're seeing it happen, right? You're seeing it at Pam Bondi. You're seeing it with the federal prosecutors. They're trying to shield themselves from decisions they're making that are allegedly unethical. And this is the deal. No one holds them. They don't have bosses. Yeah. Matt, they don't have bosses, okay? So this is the deal. They can be disbarred by attorney regulation, the licensure board. In the cases in the United States, 30 of all the exonerations, that is probably the gold standard of understanding innocence and where we've kind of the crucible of this, okay? Of the exonerations that have existed in the United States, 35% prosecutors contributed to by committing misconduct. Their convictions were overturned because they committed misconduct. And the type of misconduct, the highest source of that is hiding evidence of innocence, favorable evidence, 45%. The average number of years these people spent behind prison bars, 12.6 years for something they didn't do, because prosecutors are hiding evidence of innocence. Now, listen to this. Of those prosecutors that we know of that contributed to these exonerations, okay, less than 2% of those prosecutors that committed that terrible, egregious misconduct, intentional misconduct, less than 2% ever suffered any employment discipline or bar discipline. None of them have ever been criminally charged. And okay, so what's the next step? What? Okay, well, guess what? They can't also be sued. 50 years ago this month, the United States Supreme Court passed their own law that never existed, saying you can't sue us law for prosecutors. They have absolute immunity. Okay? So they are untouchable. They can't be sued by people who they've wronged. They don't lose their law license. They don't get fired, and they're not criminally prosecuted. So Protect Ethical Prosecutors is here so that we elevate ethical prosecutors, but we allow the victims to be able to be used as a deterrent so that we can say, look, let's get rid of absolute immunity. Why do we need it? The Supreme Court 50 years ago said, you know why we don't need it? Because there's other ways they're held accountable. Because the bar will take care of them. Because they'll be criminally prosecuted. Well, guess what, Supreme Court? 50 years ago, hasn't happened. We see the numbers of exonerations keep escalating, and misconduct is such an excruciatingly, it's an epidemic in this country. It's horrible. And
there's no civil recourse.
There's no civil recourse. There's no recourse at all. But the worst thing is the victims that suffer this harm have absolutely no recourse, and prosecutors have absolutely no deterrent when they cause intentional or knowing misconduct. And so that's what we're targeting here is let's think about using this mechanism. It's used in every other profession. Police officers can be sued. Doctors can be sued. Architects can be sued. Criminal defense lawyers can be sued. But we've decided that prosecutors should be above the law, above everybody else. So I think it's time. It's the modern era now.
And how does it start? Is that like legislation? You got to
legislation.
Just go
or a ballot measure. Look, we did a poll in Colorado with a very I'd say moderate pollster. I was going to say conservative, but that wouldn't be accurate. And 83% of Coloradans agree that prosecutors should be able to be sued when they commit knowing and intentional misconduct. They agree that this is pretty much common sense. When people say, wait, you can't sue a prosecutor when they lie to a judge? No, you can't. You can't sue a prosecutor when they put you away for 30 years for something you didn't do? No, you can't. You cannot.
I think they got Murdoch for like tax evasion and obviously killing somebody, but
right.
Other stuff. I don't think he went down for any of the nonsense going on in South Carolina.
No. I mean, look, you have some pretty notorious prosecutors who've committed some, pretty heinous misconduct. There was Harry Connick Sr., Junior's dad in New Orleans, a string of death penalty convictions that were wrongfully obtained. And there was a lawsuit. John Thompson sued him and actually recovered for all the years he was on death row wrongly because of this prosecutor, and sued, and I think the jury awarded him $14 million. That case went up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, nah, you need to really prove that the whole, prosecutor office, did this over a period of years, and it's a period of time. I mean, they are so immune that the people sitting on death row year after year after year, and then getting released after we know that it was a prosecutor that caused it. Nothing happens to him. Look, Protect Ethical Prosecutors is here to separate the careful prosecutors from the reckless ones and removing the incentive to win. Let's remove that. Let's get rid of that. Let's put standards above winning, right? That's how it should be. And let's restore public trust in the whole industry. Just like we have restaurant, we have a restaurant inspector, right? That's why we have them, to come in and make sure that restaurants are running and not serving bad food. Do you want us to get rid of restaurant inspectors? No, you don't, because who would want that? And so this is on a such, there are no inspectors. There are no inspectors. So we need to be able to give people the right to inspect and just let the jury decide. If the jury ends up deciding, yeah, I don't think what the prosecutor did was that bad. All right. All right. Prosecutors say they don't like this policy. They say, oh, you were too busy. We have all these decisions to make. Okay, forget about all the doctors in the operating room. But okay, forget about police officers with a gun to their head. Forget about those guys, okay? That can be sued, all right? But prosecutors are saying, yeah, but we can't. This is like too overwhelming for us. We don't want to be like going back and forth. Listen, it's going to be frivolous lawsuits. They trust the system every day to prosecute people. They trust juries every single day. In some states, they still ask juries to execute people. Yeah. That's how much they trust juries. But when it comes to them, the system doesn't work. Judges can't make the right decisions to throw out cases that are frivolous, and juries can't make the right. It is totally archaic that this invented law by the Supreme Court exists. It is archaic considering how much misconduct exists. And so I want to change this state by state, either ballot measure or through legislation.
It's great. I mean, listen, having a passion like that and really kind of understanding it when you have a discussion, it's common sense, right? Who wouldn't want that?
Right.
But these are the things that we don't want to think about.
Right.
They're too concerned with other issues. For us in New York, it's those insurance companies with the car insurance.
Right.
If you cap damages on car insurance cases, we're going to lower your rates.
Right.
You actually think that's going to happen? That's not going to
exactly
happen.
Never.
It's all nonsense, right?
No.
But those are the narratives that are out there. Yeah. So we could probably do another hour or two on this.
I know. People don't want it.
I know we're just kind of getting warmed up here, which would be a good excuse to have you back on someday.
I'd love it. I'd love it.
But it's this is fascinating, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. The other thing I just want to say, if you're an investigator and you're moved by this, and this is like, wow, okay, I want to be involved in the investigative process of this, really latch on to somebody who has that expertise, get it, take them as a mentor and really work on trying to be the very best at doing this stuff, because it is life and death that you're dealing with, and methodology, have a plan, and really understand what you're doing. Iris, thank you so much for making yourself available to talk about this. How do folks get a hold of you? And obviously plug the PEP as well. How do they find information on that?
I love for anybody to follow us, donate, obviously, to protectethicalprosecutors.org. And all of our information, our social media, follow us. We're always posting what we're doing and the blockades we're having and the presentations we're making. And so, and the news about misconduct and what we're trying to do to change it. So I love if people followed us, donated, protect ethical prosecutors as we really march on to this very rare mission that I don't think any other organization has ever done in the United States. So this is the first time, and we're trying to cut through it and be the first brick that falls down, and hopefully a lot more will.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we'll do our best to help get the message out.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we'll put in the show notes how to find everything.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time on the next episode. Take care.
Thanks for checking out today's show. You can tell Iris is passionate about this subject. Please see the show notes for a link to her site. And thanks to 4 Pillars and OREP for sponsoring the show. Additional thanks to the PI Institute of Education for helping us with our podcast. Also, don't forget about investigatorstoolbox.com, where you can type in Perspectives 50 to save $50 when you join. And please follow Matt and Satellite Investigations on LinkedIn. If you have a question or a comment about the show, just email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. And you can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. We'll be back next week with a new show, so make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.